Let us pray. God, open our ears to hear your word. Open our hearts to receive your word. Open our eyes to see your hand at work in the world around us. And open our lives to the infinite possibilities born of your love. Amen. The year was 1913. The place was a tiny town called Lochapoka, Alabama. Lochapoka became the site for the very first school that Julius Rosenwald would build in the South. Now, for those of you who don't know who Julius Rosenwald was, he was part owner and then president of Sears. He was a man who at the turn of the 20th century had amassed a great fortune. Historians say he was a rather relentless businessman, but he was a tremendous philanthropist. And he was always in search of ways that he could contribute to the world to try to make it better. Well, now, just before 1913, he had become aware of something that he really hadn't thought about. And that was the fact that most African Americans in this country had no place to receive an education. And that really bothered him. It began to weigh on him quite heavily. And so he reached out to the one person that he thought would be able to make suggestions to him about how he could help the world. And that was a man named Booker T. Washington. Now, Booker T. Washington was off setting up this place called Tuskegee Institute. For those of you who don't know Alabama, Tuskegee Institute that's a big place to those of us who are from Alabama, because if you ever travel there and you have a chance to look at some of the historic pictures and records from Tuskegee, it is humbling. It is humbling to be in a place that was committed to education for people who had no access to education. It is humbling. And so Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald got together to talk about how they could begin to address the plight of these uneducated folks. And Booker T. Washington said to Julius Rosenwald, see, I got a plan for you. It's really the rural areas that are most hard hit and hard pressed. And so I tell you what, if you come here to Alabama, come near me so I can provide some oversight for these schools and set up a school. I will partner with you and I will help you. For the next 20 years, Julius Rosenwald began contributing to the building of schools, over 5,000 of them in 15 states across the South, from Maryland to Texas. One of those schools is not all that far from here, and I don't know if any of y'all know Ann and Robin Smithwick, but they actually bought the Braden Sinai School campus and turned that into their home, and Ann has subsequently done some photojournalistic work around these Rosenwald schools as they came to be called. Historians say that over 700,000 black students were educated in those schools from 1913, when the first one was built, until sometime in the 60s, when public schools became desegregated following the landmark ruling of Brown versus Board of Education and the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. 700,000 students. That's a lot. Julius Rosenwald and all of the communities that came together with him in partnership to see over 5,000 schools come into being and come to educate people, they now stand in a tremendous cloud of witnesses. Witnesses to the plight of those who were without education, witnesses to what it meant to be faithful, even to those who looked different, those who you might otherwise have simply ignored. They became part of a great cloud of witnesses who realized that giving of themselves to something bigger than themselves really mattered. Our lesson from the letter to the Hebrews today talks to us about that cloud of witnesses. We talked a little bit about Hebrews last week and what we understand about the historical context of that letter. We believe that it's been written to a beleaguered group of young Christians, fledgling group of Christians who are struggling with what it means to follow God in the face of persecution. Because following God, nobody promised that was going to be an easy road. And that's one of the things that we see in this kind of roll call that we have in our lesson from the letter to the Hebrews today. We see that this was not an easy road, not for the children of Israel who came into bondage in Egypt and had to escape, or those who came into Canaan, or the roll call list that we get after that. Gideon and Barak and Jephthah and Samson and David and Samuel. And all those who came before us as forebears in the faith, who were persecuted for the love of God, who were persecuted for loving neighbor as self, who struggled, but yet they left behind a legacy. They left behind something for all of us today. We are privileged to walk in their steps and in the path that they have carved and set out for us. Mindful of the fact that had it not been for those pillars of the faith, had it not been for those who were willing to sacrifice, had it not been for those who saw the need to care about something bigger than themselves, many of us today would not be where we are. Many of us would not be where we are. But for those who chose God over the world. That great cloud of witnesses includes so many faithful people. And the privilege is ours to walk behind them, but it gives us something else. We also have now a responsibility to leave a legacy for those who come behind us. The other night, I was watching the Olympics for a little bit as Simone Manuel accepted her gold medal as the first African American ever to medal as an individual swimmer. Ever. So that was big. But her comments to the reporters were striking as this young Stanford student said, this really isn't about me. It's not about me. It's about all of the people who came before me to make it possible for me to stand here today. And it's about all the people who will come after me who now know, because of this day, that something is possible they never dreamed would be possible. That's pretty profound for a 20-year-old, I gotta tell you. And that is us today. That is all of us. We are standing in the shadows of those who have paved the way for us and made it possible for us to receive educations and to receive jobs and to live full and thriving lives and to bear witness to God. And now we share the responsibility together to believe in what is bigger than us, to care for all of those who come behind us, and to know that we will be the cloud of witnesses to bear them up. I think it's really fitting that we talk about this lesson and we think about pioneers like Julius Rosenwald on a day when students are talking about going back to school. We take the privilege of education for granted when millions upon millions of children in our world, not only just in this country, but in our world, still today don't have access to education that would make them productive and thriving human beings. We can do better in this world. We can all do better in this world. And so God calls us to take all of the gifts that we have been given, to take all of the lessons that we have been taught by that cloud of witnesses that has come before us. God calls us to ask ourselves how we will be remembered. We may not be able to do what Julius Rosenwald did. We may not be able to go out and build 5,000 schools. But whatever we are able to do to improve the life of another human being, that neighbor that we are to love as self, God calls us to do that. God calls us to remember who we are and whose we are. And as we give thanks for those who have paved the way of faith before us, to remember those that we will influence who come behind. Let us not take that responsibility lightly. Let us not take that responsibility lightly. And let us always remember that for someone else, we are the light and the path to succeeding. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Standing as we are able, let us affirm our faith using the words of the Nicene Creed.